Looking for philosophical meanderings about why I review, how I do it, and what this channel is all about as we wrap up 2025/launch into 2026? This is the video for you. That said, I will be leaving timestamps in the description in case you want to skip some meandering for other meandering, and I will actually try to stay fairly concise and on point. Hello and welcome. My name is Meepolis, they, he, she, and AI free. Today I'm posting a new State of the Channel video. The background I'm imagining will be all the books I've read of late and have yet to review. Vote in the comments for the book you want me to review first. Where to start? I guess at the beginning. Building on a lifelong love of reading, I started posting video reviews of comic books/graphic novels on YouTube about a decade ago. There has been one major channel reset since then, and innumerable smaller changes and developments. I started this project in part because no one in my life at that time wanted to talk about comic books, and I never felt like I was engaging with what I was reading nearly enough. Any aspirations I had to popularity and income were quickly dashed, although I have gotten much better at receiving random, unhinged, hateful comments. I am still very bad at responding to positive comments in a timely fashion though, so sorry. They do really boost my spirits though. What does this channel do for me? Primarily, it's a long-term hobby, simply the act of doing this year after year, engaging, learning, and growing. It does fill me with a certain amount of pride. It also involves the practicing of a number of audio and video production skills that I wouldn't engage otherwise. What this channel is not is my primary way of engaging with politics, and it's very different to how I relate to people in real life. That said, I appreciate having the space to bounce more theoretical ideas around in my head, consider how the things we create reflect our world, and parse out what is going through the brains of a select group of people, not me. Some books I like, some books I don't like, and I do think some books are actively harmful. I've also been trying for a couple of years to figure out how to articulate my feelings about the American idea of freedom of speech. TLDR, I don't think it's the be-all end-all, but I don't think banning books is helpful either. Although I do think protesting public speakers is fine. My excuse is I personally see it as all part of an ongoing public dialogue. Moving right along, I guess the next topic could be how do I decide what to read? Which is a bit of an overwhelming question, as I really just want to read maybe 75 to 85% of everything. And I have not yet totally come to terms with the fact that I can't simply know everything. But back to the point at hand. I do have a couple of mini project areas that help me narrow down my choices. There's some areas that I want to learn more about. Disability and leftist figures/ideas are good examples. I also just enjoy queer comics and reading comics by people different from me. More recently, I've been trying to read more comics that were published pre-2000, and some topics feel important to highlight right now, including reproductive justice, Gaza, and war, among other things. Since the last election in the so-called United States, I have done a lot of reflecting on the meaning of diversity in different contexts, and certainly on the one hand, there is a lot of hollow platitudes that are falling by the wayside. While they weren't ever real, I don't really think that makes it less scary. But that's just my opinion at this point in time, just like I currently feel that normalizing diversity for myself, and maybe a handful of people who watch my videos, is at least a small act of anti-fascism. Talking about representation in comics is certainly not the be-all end-all of my politics, but I do find it interesting. A fairly common question I get about my reviews is, why did you talk about X, Y, or Z? That's not what the story was about! Exclamation point. This is just because many years ago I decided to jumpstart my writing process by having a script template that I use as the basis for all of my reviews. This template includes a list of identities and themes I want to consider while reading. Currently, this list includes gender, sexuality, race, class, ability/disability, and place. And at a certain point, it seemed a bit silly to just talk about these things when I noticed something in the book that directly related to them, because for some of these things, especially disability, the entire issue at play is that they are rarely highlighted or explored in any substantive way, let alone in a way that brings better understanding, liberation, or appreciation. That said, despite what some commenters would have you believe, I am generally not calling books out for not including every single thing I care about in them. Maybe I should. Honestly, it's generally preferable that story creators focus on things that they have some sort of understanding of. It's also very much okay for someone to focus on a limited number of things. I generally just note that X, Y, or Z isn't explored, unless nuance and material reality feels like it's being actively obfuscated or whitewashed over or completely misrepresented, in which case I say those things. I will admit I probably use the phrase, quote, apparently heterosexual reproduction too much. But what can I say? I find it fun to say, and it felt a bit unfair to only highlight queer family representation. It will also never stop being a little bit funny how butthurt some people get about the idea that their favorite comics might not be perfect. I mean, if your favorite comic book was perfect, it would be the first time in history anything was. But such is the state of humanity. Apparently. Jumping to the next point in my outline, how do I rate the comics I read? Since I started out on Goodreads over 10 years ago, I have mostly continued to rate things in the general way they outline with 1 to 5 stars. 3 is fairly average to me, with 2 stars being more meh and 1 star being reserved for titles that I have very strong negative feelings about. 4 stars is where most books I like live, with 5 stars being reserved for books I thought really wowed me and broke the mold in some ways that stood out to me. That doesn't mean that 5-star books are perfect, because nothing is perfect. I'm not always able to identify the flaws while writing the review, but I try and seek out negative reviews as part of my writing process, so I can at least consider the flaws that random other people on the internet see in them. Because, side note, I am the kind of person who goes around looking at as much of what other people have to say about a book before I write up a review as I can. I am not trying to divulge to you my thoughts completely pure and unadulterated by outside perspective. That is certainly a way of going about things, but I am trying to learn and develop my awareness and knowledge through this exercise, so that would be a bit counterproductive. Looking over my script template, it seems appropriate to touch on the fact that I include content notes in almost all of my reviews, and these are often paired with ratings or target demographics. Obviously, I decided not to call these things trigger warnings, but that is a facet of what I consider bringing up. As someone who reviews children's lit to explicit adult, it does seem irresponsible to not give some indication where each book I read falls on this continuum, even if my target demographic is adults. My Bible Belt upbringing also brought into focus to me fairly early that different people are avoiding different things. I wish more people avoided violence and gore as much as they avoided sex, but such is life apparently. I also generally try to flag things that seem surprising, so if something seems less surprising, I might not always include it in my content notes. Wrapping things up, what do I bring to the table? If nothing else, I do think I bring a fairly interesting selection of books to the table. Many of them not super widely discussed. I'm an American who doesn't live there anymore. I'm a white person who aspires to be a race trader. I'm a gender troll, a professional Christian person, a millennial, cringe, an organizer, all cats are beautiful, circle A, COVID conscious, disabled, and self-conscious about my inability to grammar correctly. I'm also pessimistically counting down the days until my presence on YouTube ends. Perhaps I'm being a bit too pessimistic. It's certainly not the most important thing going to shit right now, but that has certainly been part of why I'm struggling so much with output. If you aren't already doing it, I would encourage you to follow all your favorite creators on multiple platforms. If I happen to be someone you want to keep eyeballs on, I would recommend at the very least bookmarking my WordPress blog. Currently, I'm also on Blue Sky, Mastodon, TikTok, Goodreads, and the Library of the Uncommons instance of Bookworm. You can also reach out to me at meepolis@proton.me if you want a way to keep up to date with my activity outside of any social media platform. In the new year, I hope to move to posting my reviews as audio only, aka a podcast, alongside of these videos, as that does seem more sustainable. Although I am aware that even podcasts are increasingly running into issues with hosting and distribution. As far as tech goes, I don't have my first mic in front of me, but a couple years ago I did end up getting a Blue Yeti, but all the video content has been done 100% on a Sony Handycam HDR CX240, which I'm sure is pretty embarrassing, but did I mention I'm also poor and humble? Audio editing is in Audacity, and video editing is still in Adobe Premiere Elements 15, because it was a one-time purchase. The closest thing to trendy in this whole process is I did start using Obsidian sometime in the past year or two. That might just be trendy in the weird note-taking side of YouTube I often wander into, I don't know. Concluding for real. If you've gotten this far in this video and make content yourself, please highlight your content in the comments. Bye y'all, keep reading, and remember all colonial settler states are a lie. And Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders. which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, an Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.